So I'm going to try to slap a quickie together here. This is how we do. Anyway, there's a post for Educate, Legalize Idaho. Oh man, Idaho has so many problems. It's bad. Anyway, I liked it. It's a good, at least they're trying. And so I made a comment. That's good. At least you're not advocating for legalizing basic fundamental human rights, because they're basically just complaining about the legislature and certain members of it, even though they're all as bad involved. Anyway, so the author, he's like, what? Like, it's good that you're not advocating for legalizing basic fundamental human rights. He doesn't know, or he's not behaving as though he knows. He seems confused. Like, what? Anyway. So, to save myself some effort, I do this with individuals, who seem like they want to know. This guy probably should know. Anyway, so I'm not necessarily going to read everything. I'm just going to stutter through everything if I try to. But here we go. What was the standing legal status of cannabis before government perjured terminology and definitions? How are people actually supposed to behave with this very useful plant? I'll share some legal history research with you. I'm very glad you're asking questions, and you'll find a lot more over on my photo thread or on my page if you really want to know more. I learned, and so I'm teaching things that nobody else was able to teach me. We'll look at all these. Maybe just pause the videos. If you want to really absorb this information, you're going to have to probably pause the videos and really try to take it in, really wrap your mind around this history. It's 165 plus years ongoing right now, longest world war in human history, sixth longest world war in human history, the longest running civil war in the history of the United States. Anyway, the smartest minds in history advised against prohibition, and therefore they would have also advised against legalization because we don't license liberties. Did you know that Albert Einstein was a close friend of Fiorello LaGuardia and unofficial advisor to the LaGuardia Committee, who made a full report that Congress ignored in favor of you-know-who? We'll get into that. Anyway, so here's this. If you haven't seen it, I guess pause it. This is actually what Einstein said. And this is actually what LaGuardia said. And if you understand it, read it for comprehension, and compare the two, then yes. Okay, so we can trust basically Einstein on theoretical physics and mathematics, but when it comes to prohibition, no, he doesn't know. All right. Who could ever forget this guy? He willfully perjured himself to Congress. Whether he knew better or not it's not the point. He still willfully perjured himself, and ignorance is no excuse. So this is what he said. We have urged the states to revise their definitions so as to include all parts of the plant, as it now seems that the seeds and portions other than the dried flowering tops contain positively dangerous substances. As a matter of fact, the staminate leaves are about as harmless as a rattlesnake. So in this act, it was necessary to make the definitions all-inclusive. Harry Jacob Anslinger, 1937, exact. These are two quotes, and this is exact order that they come in. The first one, and then the next one right after it. Excerpt from his testimony to Congress. So everything perjured intentionally to cause harm, no matter who, is decidedly ignorant and in denial today. The truth remains historically reserved, invoked, and affirmed equal cannabis freedoms for all humanity since before written language. And yeah, this guy had a cannabinoid deficient brain, and that's what prohibition. Poor guy. So yeah, there's the difference between legal and lawful. Hopefully you've covered that. There's about a dozen attorneys that follow me pretty regularly because I can explain 10/10 of criminal law better than most of them. In fact, I've corrected a few of them, and they appreciated it, the new information. Anyway, so here's a brief. It is. There's what's lawful, and there's what's legal. And what is legal is not always lawful, and what is lawful is not always legal. They are not the same things. And this is just one. There's a lot of information on it. Obviously, if you're going to look into anything I'm saying, look into it for yourself. Really find out as much as you possibly can. That's what I've tried to do. I've had to learn as much as I possibly can, more than anybody else. So they couldn't say that they have a higher knowledge and hold it over my head, because that's the number one way that we've enslaved people all throughout history, is to withhold information from them. Anyway, pay very close attention to what these and exactly what each of them are. because they're very different. And I'm serious. Go over it on my page, and you'll see for yourself. You'll save yourself a decade of research. I can do this all day. I've been at it for a decade. So can you spot the difference? Let's have a look. What does this say? Report of the Indian Hemp Drug Commission, 1893-94, Volume 1. There's 9 volumes? Yeah, British report published in 1894. Oh, and then let's look at this. I mean, let's actually get, somebody should, and I already have. I made a post about it. It's in my book. I haven't quite finished it because my life's been so disenfranchised. 75 years later, now what do we have? It's called Marijuana Report of the Indian Hemp Drug Commission, 1893-1894, by John Kaplan, who basically turned the entire book. It didn't really say anything about marijuana at all before, and then all of a sudden, marijuana is the demon plant. It's evil. It's bad. This was a legal document. This wasn't. This was like a independent research paper that pretty much was validating, saying it's not really that big of a deal, and Great Britain was blaming it on other things like cholera, and it's just if you're going to try to subjugate somebody, you got to make them feel bad for something, and it was immoral. But this was worse. This was much worse. Anyway. And yes, we should all know about LaGuardia, by what LaGuardia said by now. The people do not want it. It is not enforceable. Prohibition was not enforceable. And, legalization is not enforceable. So what do people do? How do people behave? Well, this is the old famous black and white photo. Okay? It's the Parisian lady with her cannabis and her cat. And what is she doing? She's sitting in her garden with her newspaper and her cat and her cannabis and her parrots and, living her best life. I mean, it's as plain Jane garden variety vegetable as anybody could see, but I mean there it is. And then so what's the modern day equivalent now? I mean anymore it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. I wish I had the difference in years between these two photos. It's over 100 years, I think. Definitely. So it's not medical, it's not legalized, it's not recreational, and it's not prohibitive. It's cannabis freedom. I don't know how else to say that. That's what it is. It's not the other things people are trying to make it out to be. Unfortunately for them, and it's sad that they're having their beliefs destroyed. But anything that can, if something can be destroyed by the truth, then yes, it deserves to be. So, Mulberry versus Madison says a lot. That a law that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. So the only valid law is and will ever be equal cannabis freedoms for everyone, because that's what the majority of the people demand. I'm included in that, guys. So this is the only logical conclusion for anyone who actually knows the legal history. And no one certainly wants to violate these laws. How inconsiderate would that be? And so now, here we go. We talked about Mulberry versus Mass. So no state shall convert a liberty into a license and charge a fee, therefore. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, 319 U.S. 105. If the state converts a right or liberty into a privilege, the citizens can ignore the license and the fees and engage in the right with impunity. Shuttlesworth versus the city of Birmingham, Alabama, 373 U.S. 262. Now, why would you want to violate those laws? The people have lawfully reserved historically evident rights and are at liberty to grow, use, and exchange cannabis freely, unlicensed, untaxed, free production, consumption, and trade of cannabis. We have no better investment available to us but to uphold the inherent natural rights of the people. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. So the original black and white photo was 1910. The other one was basically, last year, 2024 or something. Yeah. Oh, high concentrations of THC are not natural, they're bad. Do you know what honeybees do? Humans have had naturally concentrated THC since we've had honeybees. That wasn't until we removed the most important pollen source. with humanity literally trying to eradicate cannabis off the planet, but nobody can figure out why the bee populations are dying off. So, moving on. Hemp for the bees. Research suggests that hemp cultivation could potentially assist in a declining bee population. Hemp overcomes the gaps. There was no gap before. During the time period that other plants stopped flowering, it therefore has the ability to act as and I put original pollen source, that I put that in there, so that's what I'm using, for bees, and could sustain their populations. Yeah, they do. They love it. Bees love it, but not because they have anandamide receptors, but because we have anandamide receptors, and we need it, and we need honeybees. But wait, why is it the most important pollen source? Because it can grow in basically any biome where most any other plant can grow, and it produces the most cellulose faster than bamboo per hectare. And I suppose I haven't mentioned yet that it's a flowering herbal whole food that was around the entire world with honeybees before we started to eradicate both of them by, via trying to eradicate the deadliest substance known to mankind, the deadlier than a rattlesnake. What's the worst thing you've ever heard somebody say about? Yeah, that is it. That's the one. What Anslinger said, exactly. And yeah, John Kaplan, professor of lies at Stanford Law University. There is no shortage of examples of people invoking religious freedoms, but here's one example. But we can do better than that. It's a human right. It always has been. Anyway, here's Exodus, Moses, holy oil anointing. I mean, yeah, it's a cannibalism. I mean, sure, yeah, okay, I buy it. That's great. Why not? I mean, it totally makes sense. They can't tell you what it's anything else. It's not, fragrant cane. I mean, fragrant cane. Okay, sure, yeah. I mean, okay, great. Religious freedom, invoke it all you want. Not a problem, but it's better than that. Why should anybody be an exception? So quite contrast when it's really put into proper perspective. What is that? I'm always saying, legalized ignorance is no excuse. Yeah, that's the one. This is what cannabis freedom looks like. Just this guy right here. Doesn't he look like he has freedom? He looks free. He's enjoying his best free life, just like the Parisian lady with the cannabis in her cat and the dude in his backyard with a beer in his plants. Like that's normal life, guys. And it was for most people. So yeah, this is what the U.S. government marijuana prohibition looks like. We got an electrical outlet that somebody tried to chop with some bolt cutters. Hooray. I mean, prohibition, yeah, the dumpster fire of freaking injustice. And then, what we're going to do, we're going to fix it. Oh, yeah, we're going to fix it. Well, this is what the government marijuana legalization looks like. It wasn't, before 1947, it was cannabis in the United States pharmacopoeia, not marijuana. That's perjured terminology indefinitely, guys, if I haven't said that enough. Anyway, what do we got down here? Oh yeah, minimally regulated, not licensed, not tax-free consumption. I never said not regulated. I mean, there needs to be quality control, obviously. Obviously, there needs to be quality control so you don't get powdery mildew. And some of the moldiest, nastiest cannabis I've ever had came from government-ran dispensaries. I mean, it's gross. Why couldn't I have just grown it in my own garden? Oh, that's right, because I was disenfranchised, because I had nowhere to live, because I was living in a vehicle, because I'd been arrested for selling 3.5 grams of marijuana in the state of Idaho. Had my life entirely destroyed. Anyway. Free cannabis production, consumption, and trade, exchange. It's a human right. It always has been and always will be. And I'm not just repeating this to try to brainwash people and convince them. This is the reality, guys. So the research I've done was out of necessity for survival to basically save my life and defend myself. So, I mean, teach me something, if you can. I would really appreciate to learn more. And I'm still continuing to try to learn as much as I possibly can on these subjects. No, I'm basically a global expert on it. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I've been in contact with a lot of the most prominent advocates and activists alive around the world. What's the Supreme Law say? What would you look at that? It basically reads like equal cannabis freedoms for everyone. Whatever everyone decides is going to settle on, that looks like, why should anybody be an exception? Article 4, Section 2, Paragraph 1 of the United States Constitution, the supreme law of the land which takes precedence and supersedes state laws. The citizens of each state, and this is a law that instructs the states, the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. So why is there injustice where people are being arrested, tortured, and murdered and punished in Idaho and other places still? When other people, having their lives destroyed in one state versus, having, privileges and immunities in other states. No, this is not equal. This is not equal applicability to the law. And yes, I am the one teaching this subject. So apply that to marijuana prohibition of cannabis, marijuana legalization of cannabis, and the war on drugs. What do you get? You guessed it, the fictional word with its fictional definitions, the perjury that is marijuana. I learned a little more. It is a Spanish word. There's marijuana with a G, marijuana with an H, and marijuana. I can't even say it. Marijuana with a J. Anyway, so it's not a fictional word, but in the United States legal lexicon it is. Because, legal definitions actually mean different things than what people think they mean. If you don't have a law dictionary, then you probably don't know entirely. It's common terminology, and law is not common terminology for the layman. So cannabis is not marijuana. It never was. The legal system shouldn't have changed terminology, definitions, and laws back in favor of cannabis. And then, hemp for victory, right? And then back to marijuana, back to cannabis, back to, over and over again, if it had no guilty mind about the marijuana prohibition terminology and definitions of the law that originally forcibly imposed upon the people in the first place. Come on. Get with it. Oh, yeah. I wish I could find it. Tell me again why you think the government should be trusted to subvert our cannabis freedoms, rights, and liberties. Do you remember, prohibition? Remember that? Like the being arrested for a plant, a common garden variety vegetable? Huh. Anyway, look at the track record. They admitted guilt on numerous occasions. The Nixon advisor, and I didn't even put anything about that in here. But no, we knew what we were doing was wrong. Yeah, they admitted it. That's mens rea. That's guilty mind. And so yeah, guilty mind, the behavior, and that's perjury, terminology, and fraudulent. That's 1/10 of criminal law that the government is guilty of committing. What's the other 9/10? Well, possession. Everybody knows that. Did the government have exclusive possession of this? Cannabis? Yes. Oh, yes, they did. Were they reckless or responsible with it? With the exclusive possession that they had? Well, I shouldn't have to answer that question. Everybody knows by now they're completely reckless, and they're still being so. So why should they be trusted? And they're not. Not with this. No, it's a human right. They have no business dabbling with this, other than to control it for safety, like whatever the people deem that is. The government doesn't decide what truth is, guys. That's what the people do. Anyway, they were reckless. We don't reward bad behavior. We certainly don't punish good behavior, but that's what they've been doing. No, the truth is, if the people knew the law, then they would realize that the government should be getting arrested for 165 plus years of exclusive marijuana possession, not the people. I mean, that's what makes more sense. It really does. Anyway, support cannabis freedoms, not marijuana prohibition, not marijuana legalization. Homegrown, universally beneficial herbal cannabis freedoms. Uphold every cannabis liberty instead of prohibitive legalization. Legalized ignorance is no excuse, guys. It's just not. As if ignorance wasn't an excuse in the first place. Legalizing it isn't even any better. I mean, that's as good as, legalizing marijuana is as good as legalizing shoplifting. Like, it shouldn't, no, you can't even, here's the thing, you can't even compare the two. I mean, that's apples and oranges. That's like people trying to compare, marijuana with like fentanyl. No, that's not the thing, or like meth, or these are not, they're not the same. Anyway, it's government felony perjury of terminology and definitions. Legalizing something means it was meant to be illegal in the first place. Cannabis wasn't ever intended to be legal, but it was perjured into marijuana, the deadliest substance known to mankind, deadlier than rattlesnake. Legally speaking, it's poisonous fruit. It's a legally poisonous fruit. Marijuana is legally poisonous fruit from the marijuana prohibition perjury tree. What is it? Marijuana. Report of the Indian drug. Perjury. John Kaplan, professor of lies at Stanford Law. This was a law book. This was a law book, guys. Come on. I mean, I could really do this all day, but I don't really know how much this guy's. He's the admin of this page, and he's making a post about it. And yeah, he seems like he's about as passionate as I am, but he obviously doesn't know what I know, and he hasn't had to learn it out of necessity for survival to save his own life, to make sure nobody knows. Like I've had officers I've come up to and yeah, I've had to teach them. They were calling it marijuana, and by the time they left, they knew better. They actually knew better. You know, if the only two words you speak are taco, the only two Spanish words you know are taco and marijuana, then you should probably learn the actual, legal, English medical name. At least, the medical industry has some respect because they at least upheld the name to some extent. But they were forced by the government to, they couldn't even do research and abide by the law and all this other stuff. So, I mean, this is how we do. So, I mean, there's a lot to know. There's a lot to know. And legalization is not the way forward. It's just not. And, I hate to say, I guess I'm a little ahead of my time, but then again, it's only because I've gone so far back in time. Anyway,